They say don't mess with neighbors, but my HOA's Karen didn't just mess with me, she declared war on my lawn. What she didn't know was that I had the perfect plan to turn the tables. The HOA Karen strikes. It all began when I decided to do something different with my front yard. I was tired of wasting weekends mowing grass and spending money on sprinklers. So instead of keeping the traditional lawn, I turned it into a colorful, eco-friendly garden. I planted native flowers, added drought-resistant plants, and even put in a few stepping stones to make it look neat and inviting. To me, it wasn't just easier to maintain. It actually looked better than the plain green yards up and down the street. Most of my neighbors complimented it, telling me how refreshing it was to see something different. But then came Karen. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of our HOA, armed with a clipboard, a permanent scowl, and an obsession with enforcing rules that only seemed to matter to her. One morning, she marched up to my front door, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, and handed me a notice. With her usual sharp tone, she announced that my yard was out of compliance with HOA standards. According to her, every lawn needed to be perfectly green, uniform, and grass-covered, no exceptions. I tried to explain that my yard wasn't a mess. It was eco-friendly, low-maintenance, and completely within my rights. But Karen wasn't interested in hearing it. To her, my flowers were weeds, my stones were clutter, and my yard was a personal insult to the neighborhood. She gave me 2 weeks to rip everything out and replace it with sod or face steep fines. Standing there with her arms crossed and her smug little smirk, she made it clear she thought she'd already won. But what she didn't know was that this was just the beginning. I fight back. When Karen slammed that notice into my hand, I'll admit it, I spent the first night pacing my living room, second-guessing myself. The bold black letters on that HOA violation notice glared at me from the coffee table like a silent threat. Failure to comply will result in fines not exceeding $500 per week. $500. Every single week. For wildflowers. I sat down at my desk and pulled up my laptop, determined to figure out if Karen even had the right to demand this. I wasn't about to back down without knowing the rules inside and out. The more I read, the angrier I got. First, I discovered that in my state, there was a Water Conservation Landscaping Act that specifically prohibited HOAs from forcing homeowners to install turf lawns if they chose drought-tolerant landscaping instead. In fact, the law encouraged people like me to create eco-friendly yards. Not only that, but there were even city incentives for residents who converted their lawns to native gardens. It was like the universe had handed me ammunition. Karen thought she could bulldoze me with her little HOA handbook, but the law was very much on my side. The next morning, I walked outside with a mug of coffee in hand, determined to admire my garden and remind myself why this fight mattered. The bees buzzed lazily over the purple coneflowers, and a butterfly landed on one of the milkweed plants. It was beautiful, alive, vibrant, buzzing with life. I couldn't understand how anyone could look at it and feel anything but joy. Of course, Karen didn't see joy. She saw rebellion. Sure enough, as if on cue, she was already across the street, glaring at me from her driveway. Her arms were crossed, her phone clutched in one hand, and she was muttering something to another neighbor. I raised my coffee cup in a friendly little wave. She didn't wave back. That afternoon, I got my first fine. An envelope, shoved hastily into my mailbox, stamped with the HOA seal. $500 due immediately. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead of panicking, I gathered my paperwork, the Conservation Act, the city landscaping guidelines, and even screenshots of my yard posted on the Community AS Facebook page, where several neighbors had commented positively. Then I drafted an appeal letter. To whom it may concern, my landscaping fully complies with state law protecting drought-resistant and eco-friendly yards. The fine issued against me is invalid and unenforceable. I respectfully request that the HOA rescind this violation notice. Regards, my name. I dropped it off at the HOA office that same day, making sure Karen saw me place it into the little metal mailbox attached to the office door. The next HOA board meeting was only a week away, and I decided I'd attend in person. Normally, I avoided those meetings like the plague. Too much petty drama. Too many people arguing about fence heights and mailbox colors. But this time, I wanted Karen to squirm in front of an audience. When the evening came, I showed up early, clutching my folder of evidence like it was a shield. The room slowly filled with neighbors, some chattering casually, others whispering about the latest HOA gossip. Karen, of course, sat at the front table, presiding over the room with her gavel in hand like a self-proclaimed judge. When it came time for violations and complaints, Karen cleared her throat dramatically. Next on the agenda, Mr. My Last Name's non-compliant lawn. A few heads turned toward me. I stood, holding my papers, and walked to the front. My heart pounded, but I forced a calm smile. With respect, I began, my lawn isn't in violation of anything. In fact, it's perfectly legal under state law. Karen narrowed her eyes. The HOA has very clear standards. Grass lawns only, uniform appearance, no exceptions. I lifted the copy of the Water Conservation Landscaping Act. Actually, there are exceptions, and this law overrides your HOA rules. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors leaned forward, curious. Others looked at Karen with raised eyebrows. Karen's face turned crimson. "That doesn't apply here," she snapped. "This is our neighborhood, and we decide the rules." "Except when your rules break the law," I said evenly. The room went quiet. That was just the first round. Karen wasn't about to let this go, and honestly, neither was I. Karen regrets everything. Karen thought she had me cornered. After the HOA meeting, where I'd stood up and read state law right to her face, she stormed out like a general retreating from a battle she hadn't expected to lose. But Karen was nothing if not relentless. A week later, I found yet another notice taped to my front door. This time, she accused me of unsightly yard decorations because of the solar lights I had installed to highlight my flowers at night. It was laughable, really. My decorations were just 6 small solar-powered path lights, barely brighter than a candle flame. But Karen was desperate now, clawing at any excuse to make my life miserable. I wasn't about to back down. If she wanted war, then war she would get. The neighborhood turns. Something interesting started happening in the weeks that followed. My yard became popular. People walking their dogs would pause to admire the flowers. Kids pointed at the butterflies fluttering around the milkweed. One neighbor, a quiet man named Steve who lived 3 houses down, even stopped me one evening. "You know," he said, gesturing at the blooms, "this is the nicest yard on the street. Looks like something out of a magazine." I smiled. "Thanks, Steve. Not everyone agrees." He smirked knowingly. "Let me guess. Karen?" I laughed. "How'd you know?" "Because she tried to fine me last year for leaving my trash cans out for an extra day. She's got nothing better to do." And just like that, I realized I wasn't alone. Karen had been ruling this neighborhood with an iron fist for years, handing out fines, writing up notices, and generally making life miserable for anyone who didn't fit her rigid vision of perfection. The more people I talked to, the more stories I heard. Karen fined the Johnsons for having their garage door painted the wrong shade of white. She fined the Thompsons because their mailbox had a non-regulation flag. She even tried to fine a widow on the corner for planting roses that didn't match the HOA SC color scheme. Everyone hated her. They'd just been too scared to fight back. But my lawn gave them hope. Karen escalates. Of course, Karen didn't take kindly to the sudden support I was getting. She doubled down. One morning, I woke up to find a city inspector standing in my yard. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint, claiming my landscaping was attracting pests and lowering property values. The inspector was professional, but puzzled. "Honestly," he said, looking around, "this is one of the cleanest, nicest yards I've seen all month. You're not in violation of anything." He closed his clipboard, gave me a reassuring smile, and left. I stood on my porch watching as Karen peeked through her blinds across the street. When she saw the inspector leave without issuing a citation, she yanked the blinds shut so fast they nearly tore off the window. I couldn't help but chuckle. The tipping point. The breaking point came at the next HOA meeting. The room was packed. More neighbors than I'd ever seen show up before. People were fed up, and they were ready to speak out. Karen sat at the front table, gavel in hand, trying to maintain order. But the murmurs and side conversations were louder than usual. When the meeting opened for community comments, hands shot up everywhere. Mrs. Johnson stood first. "Karen, why did you fine us for our garage door? The painter used the exact color on the HOA-approved list." Then Mr. Thompson, "Why do we pay HOA fees if all you do is hand out fines? Where's the money going?" Then Steve, "Why are you harassing my name when his yard is the best thing that happened to this neighborhood in years?" The room erupted into agreement. Voices rose, people shouted, some even banged their fists on the tables. Karen tried to slam her gavel, demanding order, but no one listened. For the first time, I saw real fear flicker across her face. She wasn't in control anymore. The vote. Eventually, one neighbor shouted the words that changed everything. "Let's vote her out." The room went silent. Then murmurs of agreement spread like wildfire. According to the HOA bylaws, if a majority of members called for it, the president could be removed from office, and right then, nearly every hand in the room went up. Karen's face turned pale. "You can't do this. I've dedicated years to this community." "Exactly," Steve said dryly. "And you've made every one of those years miserable." The motion passed. Karen was out. She slammed the gavel one last time, then threw it down and stormed out of the room, muttering under her breath. The door banged shut behind her. The entire room broke into applause. The aftermath. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood changed. The HOA board, now under new leadership, scrapped the outdated lawn rules. They even encouraged eco-friendly landscaping, citing my yard as the perfect example. Other neighbors started planting wildflowers, installing rain barrels, and adding pollinator gardens. The street blossomed with color and life. Karen, meanwhile, sulked in her house. Her blinds stayed shut, her yard grew over-manicured but lifeless, and she rarely showed her face outside. One evening, as I sat on my porch sipping lemonade, I saw her walk past, glaring at my garden. But instead of smirking, I just gave her a polite nod. Because the truth was, she'd already lost. She had tried to shut down my lawn. But in the end, she lost her power, her position, and the respect of the entire neighborhood. And my little eco-friendly garden. It became the crown jewel of the block.